Breitbart posted a video of a group of physicians giving a press conference about medical advances in the fight against COVID. Some of the news the doctors delivered was hopeful because there is hopeful news to report. 17 million people saw that video, the president retweeted it. This enraged Democrats. Any scientific advancement that reduces the suffering of Americans in an election is a threat to Joe Biden's campaign. So they decided to pull that video off the internet. 15 years ago, that would have been absurd. You couldn't have done it. This was America. You weren't allowed to ban a news story just because it might hurt your candidate's poll numbers. In any case, it was impossible. There were too many news outlets then. No one could control them all. That has changed. While the rest of us were sleeping, or in the case of so many of our senators taking payoffs from Google, a tiny number of left-wing corporations took virtually complete control of all news and information in this country. Now, if Democrats want to erase a politically inconvenient news story fewer than 100 days before an election, they can do that. And they did do it. Big tech censored science. They pulled the video of doctors and lab coats talking about coronavirus research, and they hid that video from the public. That's exactly what the Chinese government so often does, except when Silicon Valley erases your freedoms, they lecture you as they do it. They've got all the ruthlessness of Chinese authoritarians, but with double the self-righteousness. It's the American version. Thankfully, none of this applies to us at Fox News. We happen to work for one of the very few mass media companies left in America that is not controlled by Google or Facebook. We can report the news honestly. Big tech can't censor us, at least not right now. They're not allowed to watch these physicians on YouTube tonight, but we can show them to you here, and we're going to. Here's Dr. Bob Hamilton.
I think that it's important that all of us who are here today realize that our kids are not really the ones who are driving the infection. It is being driven by older individuals. And yes, we can send the kids back to school, I think, without fear. We need to not act out of fear. We need to act out of science. We need to do it. We need to get it done.
What you just heard is not a crackpot theory. It is at the center of mainstream science. Increasingly, what you just heard represents the consensus among physicians and researchers around the world. Children are not meaningful vectors for the coronavirus. Worldwide, there is not a single reported case of a student infecting a teacher with the virus. Not one case. And that's why so many nations around the world are reopening their schools this fall. But we're not. We've got a presidential election in November. Children must suffer so that Joe Biden can win that election. That is the imperative, the political imperative driving our so-called health policy. But you're not allowed to know that, so they pulled the video telling you that. Here's another physician from the same press conference called Dr. Stella Emanuel.
There is a cure for COVID. There is a cure for COVID. It's called hydroxychloroquine, it's called zinc, it's called Zithromax. And it is time for the grassroots to wake up and say, no, we're not going to take this any longer. We're not going to die.
Dr. Emanuel's claim is harder for us to endorse. Is hydroxychloroquine part of a cure for the coronavirus? We don't know the answer. We do know that many frontline physicians around the world have prescribed hydroxychloroquine and continue to prescribe it. We've interviewed some of them on the show. The drug appears to show promise in treating some early-stage patients. That's good news. The science on hydroxychloroquine is not settled either way. Science rarely is settled. That's why it's science and not, for example,
it's clean.
Radical feminist theory. Science is constantly
just move the bowl.
As we test and retest.
Just move the bowl out. Put it in the sink.
Reality. That's the whole point of science.
You're using it, right?
Unfortunately, reality is not the point of politics. Yeah. Winning is the point of politics. So they scrubbed that video. Here's more of it.
My message to Dr. Anthony Fauci is, when is the last time you put a stethoscope on a patient? That when you start seeing patients, like we see on a daily basis, you will understand the frustration that we feel. And you need to start feeling for American people, like we the frontline doctors feel. And you need to start realizing that they are listening to you. And if they're going to listen to you, you got to give them a message of hope.
Oh, that clip enraged me. Because above all, you must never mock the sainted Anthony Fauci. Under no circumstances can you note that Dr. Fauci is in fact very often a hypocritical buffoon who refuses to admit what he clearly doesn't know.
I don't trust him.
If you say that out loud,
Fauci.
they will cancel you. Fauci is too useful to the Biden campaign. So until November, Fauci's word must be law, even when it doesn't make sense. Criticize Fauci and you will disappear from the internet. And so Dr. Emanuel disappeared from the internet. And then Google's countless toadies online did the cleanup work, the ugly stuff. The Daily Beast attacked Dr. Emanuel for the crime of getting her medical degree in Africa, and then suggested she believed in witchcraft, because, you know, Africans do that, right?
Now that's
So
racist.
political correctness is fine with the Daily Beast most of the year. But this is election season, so Dr. Emanuel must be destroyed. The Daily Beast was happy to help achieve that. So, by the way, were the think tank libertarians, including some still posing as conservatives, people you read, people who work for places you probably have sent money to. You saw them on Twitter today, helpfully reminding you that this variety of censorship isn't really censorship because the government isn't doing it. Oh. They didn't explain exactly why that distinction matters to anyone. In fact, censorship is always bad, whether it's imposed by Congress or whether it's imposed by monopolies that only exist because they receive special carve-outs granted to them by Congress. It doesn't matter. Censorship is always wrong. Censorship does not improve public health. In fact, it threatens public health. The authorities responsible for containing this pandemic clearly have failed. We know that. Some of them are decent people. They're trying their best. But despite their efforts, they've frequently been wrong. We know that because it's on tape. So what we desperately need now, as we always do in crisis, and especially in a crisis that can be solved by science, is more voices in the conversation, not fewer. Want proof? Here's the Surgeon General. Remember when he told us this?
What the World Health Organization and the CDC have reaffirmed in the last few days is that they do not recommend the general public wear masks. Wearing a mask improperly can actually increase your risk of getting disease.
Oh, so masks are dangerous. Right. That wasn't very long ago. Now masks are mandatory, and the cops will nab you if you're not wearing one. What does this tell us? It tells us what we already knew, if we were honest, which is that scientific consensus changes. That's the point. As we learn more, our conclusions change. Legitimate scientists understand that. That's called the scientific method. Big tech companies don't care one way or the other because their goal is not the truth. Their goal is to control the outcome of an election. It's not to protect public health. This isn't about public health, and it's not about science. It never was. It's about power. And no one in the history of the world has ever had more power than Google and Facebook have right now. So we should have seen this coming. People with power abuse that power, and people who have absolute power abuse it absolutely, as we learned. Alex Marlowe, for one, did see it coming. He runs Breitbart. We talked to him about this exact question more than a year ago.
This is the battle. They are trying to win the 2020 election by shutting down and censor the outlets that might give voices to the voiceless, the people disenfranchised.
You really think you're going to get reelected president if nobody can hear your message?
Absolutely. They see this crystal clear, and that's why they're trying to shut down you and me.
Alex Marlowe rejoins us today. Alex, thanks so much for coming on. So you were just censored by the big tech companies, Google, Facebook, and Twitter. But you've done research into the specifics. So I think anyone paying attention realizes there is censorship going on, but it's done in a very stealthy way. Google has been limiting your reach without telling you dishonestly. Give us an example of what you've learned they're doing to your site.
Thanks, Tucker. Thanks for having me. Always a treat to be with you. And I will start with some breaking news that I can share on the show, which is at Breitbart. We've done deep dive research into our Google traffic, comparing it to the 2016 election. And we picked that because we unearthed video a couple of years ago with our own Alan Bakari, who reported on the global vice president of Google, Kent Walker, who said that he's going to endeavor to make populism and nationalism a blip or a hiccup. So we naturally took him at his word, because if you understand the left, you understand that they don't tend to lie about such things. And we started looking at our traffic, and gradually since the 2016 election, Google's been diminishing our search results, and then all of a sudden, in May of this year, we virtually lost all Google traffic, all search traffic, altogether. Let me give you some specific pieces of data. Google tracks something called a visibility index. This is sort of like their Nielsen score. That's when your content shows up on one of their pages. Breitbart's is down 99.7%. Overall, our Google traffic is down nearly 2/3. If you want to search for Joe Biden or Biden, the chances of you getting a Breitbart article are virtually zero, Tucker. Virtually no opportunity for you to get it, unless, of course, you add the word Breitbart, which explains what's left of our Google traffic. Now, naturally, we looked at other outlets to see if there is a pattern. Of course, we have more access to our own data, but we compared the top 50 or so top publishers, and we found that 8 out of the bottom 10 when it comes to Google search are right-of-center outlets. That includes Fox News, and even the Daily Caller is one of the 2 outlets that actually somehow performs worse than Breitbart.
This is not a small thing. Google has a monopoly. It's allowed by Congress, by the shills who allowed this, Senator Lee, among others, who really should be ashamed of themselves. And they are therefore the gateway to all human information in English. So if you don't exist on Google, you don't exist. Did they tell you that they were going to shut you down in order to get Joe Biden elected, or did they just do it?
They won't tell us specifically why. They only provide vague talking points about things that are way out of our control and are non-specified, are totally subjective. And I think your thesis, Tucker, is right on the money here. This is 100% about the 2020 election,
yes,
controlling the narrative and controlling what people read. If outlets like Breitbart cannot reach new voters via Google, then that is going to be all the more people who are getting their news 100% from CNN, the New York Times, and the people who would do anything in their power to get Joe Biden into the White House.
So maybe the Congress should have done something about this before allowing a company that is not an American company, it's not in any sense an American company, to have total control over all of our news and information. Maybe someone should have noticed. Why didn't anybody do anything?
That is the mystery that it boggles the mind, because I don't feel like the Republican Party feels the existential threat that you and I have been trying to convey to them. This is it. Freedom of speech in the United States right now is controlled by Google, it's controlled by Facebook, and it's controlled by Twitter. Remember, Google controls YouTube, Tucker. This is exactly why we saw these videos memory hold from the internet yesterday. And guess what explanation we got from Breitbart when they took down our videos? Vague, pablum, nothing specific. They wouldn't cite a specific piece of misinformation. And now all of a sudden, Google, Mark Zuckerberg, etc., they apparently know more about hydroxychloroquine, the coronavirus, than board-certified doctors.
Exactly. And we should say we would rather talk to them than talk about them, so we asked representatives from all 3 of those companies to come on tonight. But of course, they ducked the invitation. Alex Marlowe, thanks so much.
Thank you, Tucker.
So physicians are uniquely qualified to comment on science and medicine. We used to believe doctors had the right to say what they think about their medical practice. But you just saw the doctors in that video have their views censored, pulled off the internet. Is that the best way to conduct science? Whether you agree with their conclusions or not? Joining us tonight, Fox News medical contributor Dr. Mark Siegel, who saw the banned video. We're happy to have you. Doctor, good to see you.
Good to see you, Tucker. First of all, Facebook and Twitter and social media and Google and YouTube, they are not doctors and they are not scientists. They should not be censoring physicians' opinions. So I want to start there. Having said that, I want you to know that here's the key issue from a science point of view. Follow the science. Back in March, we were very concerned about COVID-19 exploding. You were among the first. And we had to go with anecdotal information, and we had a study out of China that showed hydroxychloroquine worked. It seemed to work. And we tried it, and many physicians took it, and many nurses took it. And my father took it, and to this day, I think that his life was saved because of it. And then we said, follow the science. Well, Tucker, this week, 2 big studies came out. One out of Brazil that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the gold standard, double-blinded, prospective randomized trial over 600 patients. Another study in the Annals of Internal Medicine, we've been following the Minnesota study. Both of them show that hydroxychloroquine does not seem to work early in hospitalization or before patients go in. That's where the science is right now. More studies need to come. I think it is not the right time for anecdotal evidence, for doctors to get there in white coat ceremonies and to shake rattles and say, take it, our patients got better, our patients got better. That's a month or two ago. Now we're on to the scientific studies. Does it mean they don't have a right to do it? No. This is free speech. They have every right to do it, and they have every right to express their medical opinion, and Facebook should be ashamed. The video should be posted. Me, follow the science. The science right now is not, this week, behind hydroxychloroquine, Tucker.
Thank you, Dr. Siegel, for that. And I really have tried from day one to stick to that standard. Very quickly, I don't see any evidence that children anywhere in the world have spread the coronavirus to teachers. That's another thing they said in the video, and that was pulled off the internet. Is there any justification for removing that statement?
I wouldn't remove that either. Young children are much less likely to spread this, and there's no evidence that it has spread in schools that way if they're carefully set up. They have every right. In fact, the doctor in that video is a pediatrician. I think they're overstating the risk in schools. Can children spread it to adults? Yes. They're much less likely to.
Dr. Siegel, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Honesty is the only answer in a moment like this. And by the way, if you continue to lie, no one believes you, and social trust evaporates, and you can't respond to any crisis, and that's pretty much where we are now. Big Tech, by the way, didn't merely censor the physicians. They also went after anyone who shared the video. In fact, Twitter just took Donald Trump Jr.'s son offline.